What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. This is episode 53, the first episode of season 2. And today we're going to talk about how to hack your brain like a Stoic. I am Danny and my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Hey, Danny.
So hack your brain like a Stoic.
We had to hack something.
Why would I do that? Yeah.
And we had to do it somehow, right?
I know you have to, right? Everybody does it these days. They're hacking all kinds of things. It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Everything has to be hacked. Can't do it the long way. Have to do it the short way. And, Stoicism is quite popular these days. As a matter of fact, some people actually include it in the name of their podcast. Go figure.
I know. It's crazy, right? It's like it matters. On a side note, though, I have to say, dude, it cracks me up every time I see things like how to hack your storage space or like something like that. And it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's just get rid of your junk. But
yeah,
everybody's looking for a quick fix. And, while many things are simple, they're just not easy. And everybody wants it to be easy. They're all looking for the easy solution. So today we're going to give you the easy solution for how to hack your brain like a Stoic. And if you're looking for a quick fix, you should pick us up midweek for our quick fixes.
Also true, right? That's a good one. I like that. Yeah. So, I think it's interesting because Stoicism, I think, when a lot of people, if they look at the, traditional works and stuff, you see something that incorporates a lot, like a lifelong practice, a lot of routine, a lot of sort of ultimately, developing how you think about yourself and the world and understanding what matters to you. So we want to give some people some ideas to make this short, right? To make it easier to at least get started, I think. Because once you get started on it, then you can go further.
And I think we should also say up front, just so we don't mislead people, that there is no quick fix for Stoicism, for living a virtuous life. Like I would go so far as to say most of the Stoics, when they died, they would say they were not yet complete. And this whole idea that we have nowadays of being able to do things immediately, like there's a best-selling book right now about thinking like a monk from a 30-something-year-old guy who quit being a monk when he's 30. How do you learn to be a monk in less than 30 years? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, in order to be a monk, you need to do it for life. But we're focused on this. We're hyper-focused on this granularity, hacking brain stuff, like all this stuff to be more efficient, when really the tincture of time does a lot.
Well, no, I think you're right. You made a great point. I think a lot of the philosophers that people look to, and a lot of the sages and stuff, it was lifelong. It was the journey, right? And the point is to keep at it, make your life the best life. And most of them, they would have never felt complete, finished. It's not like there is an end, right? Because there's always a way you can improve. But I think the point is to do it, right? To be that person, to really commit to it. And I think right now, it's so common to see these trends and trendy stuff come and go. And, you get this sort of like dipping into a topic where it might help somebody a little bit, but then they don't have the background, or they haven't built up what they need to keep at it for a long time. So it just is like one of those things that they did for a little while.
Well,
and it comes and goes.
That's what it is. Everybody wants to scratch the itch, because like you have this moment where you're like, my life sucks. I need to fix immediately. And then once that's fixed, you forget about it and move on. Yeah. So we're going to talk about that today. If your life sucks, stick with it till the end, because we're going to give you all the answers right here today.
Damn right we are.
Yeah.
So what do you if somebody's interested, you think, in Stoicism and trying to live this way, be like a Stoic, especially from the mental side, because I think that's kind of what the focus was. What do you think is like a good starting place for them?
Well, pretty much every Stoic book talks about what's in your sphere of control. And while it's talked about a lot, I think that, the value of it is so undervalued. Because here's the thing, like the whole entire self-help market is built upon relationships, money, and health. And those are three things that by definition you have no control over. So like we are ingrained to want to control things we have no control over, or very limited control over. Okay. Whereas other things that we do have control over would be things like our thoughts, our values, the way we look at our perspective. So those are some things that we might have more control over, but we give those up because we're pursuing these other things that we think we can control.
Yeah, and I think actually, it's a good point, because when we pursue those things that we think we can control, but we can't, and we don't see the results we want, I think a lot of people also start to then sort of fall back on like a victimization, blame game. And then what they ultimately end up doing is they end up really, chipping away at all of their effective agency and mentally sort of destroying themselves from having control over anything. So, it's like, and it's a really detrimental way of being in the world, because you end up, you're kind of, one, you're not doing anything to promote your situation, and you're sort of at the whim of whatever circumstances happen to fall your way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right. For the Stoics, I think that's I think it is an important thing that's not valued as much as it should be, which is, we have control over our own self, our own mind, and how we live the actions we choose in the circumstances we're in, right? So we don't have control over the circumstances themselves. We don't have control over other people, how they react. We don't have control over, the world outside, but we do have control over how we, prepare, plan, think, behave. And if we focus on that, at least we've done the best we can. And at least we've done everything we can, and we can then be, happy essentially with ourselves, or satisfied with the fact that there was nothing else we could have done, right, to make the situation different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's a very handy practice for anybody who's dealing with difficulties in their life, is to sit down with their difficulty and realize what's in their control and what's not in their control. And then a very practical way of approaching it is, what actions can I take? And then what are the results that I want? And start taking the actions and be very, very patient with the results. And try not even to expect them, because the results are 100% out of your control. The actions are 100% in your control. You can do that stuff. That's up to you. Focus on what's in your control. Reward yourself for what you're doing that's in your control. And then the results may come, the results may not, but you're doing the most that you can.
It's funny, and I think to that point, when we had a Massimo on the show, he had mentioned too, literally when a situation comes up, you can sit down with paper and you can write down in 2 columns, right? What's in my control in this situation? What's out of my control? And you might have to write it down at first, for a while, and you do that, but it helps also, kind of, I think, make you more aware of it over time, so that when situations arise, you don't need to always get out the pad, right? But at least it keeps you aware of it, keeps you focused on it, so you're not doing or not focusing on things that are just really you have no control over, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because I think there's so many times in life, I think, where we can all identify when we let our we react to something rather than actually acting and having self-control. We're just reacting because of our emotions, because of the situation, and we end up doing something we are unhappy with, or something detrimental to ourselves, or detrimental to ultimately the goals that we want to achieve. And it's part of it, I think, is just slowing down. It's slowing down and being more self-aware, both of what's going on with you, and then what's going on in the world is causing it. Yeah,
that's a good point, because they've done studies where they told people that they had to deliver something across campus, and they had like a fixed amount of time, and on their way there was someone either suffering or they were in pain or something, and all the people who had a time limit that they needed to get the thing to the other side of campus didn't stop. But pretty much all the people who didn't have a time limit, they all stopped to help the person. And like,
if I remember correctly, it was actually at a seminary. It was kids studying to be literally to be helping in a position where you would help others. And they actually they hired an actor to play somebody who was like really, you could obviously in trouble, obviously having problems, and they put them in such a way where they literally had to walk over them. And all the kids who thought they didn't have time just walked right over them. It's like, so yeah.
And so that, I mean, that right there is a difficult paradox with life, because like we have a lot of time, 80 years average lifespan. That's a lot of time. But at the same time, it's not a lot of time. It's finite. I mean, we have to stop living like we
It
have a
is.
thousand years to live. We're stuck in this paradox of like we have a very long
Yeah.
life, but also it's very finite. So trying to find the balance that allows you to live the best life, that's a challenge.
Well, I think recognizing that too, we have, it can feel like we have a lot of time, but we also don't. We are all going to die. And, recognizing that also kind of, it really highlights the point that, your choices, every choice you make matters in the sense that, you're always choosing between things, right? You're always saying no to something. And that's going to ultimately matter in the end because that determines how much you can actually do, right? And whether or not you can do all the things you want. So it's important to know what matters to you most in order to live that life. I think that's crucial. A lot of people like kind of forget because you get caught up in, all the things of the world, all the sort of, advertising and pressures and whatnot, and trying to be this and that. I think that really does get in the way of our own happiness.
Which brings us to the next point of kind of living a directed life.
Yeah.
So like since we're all going to die, we should therefore live well, and in order to do that, you kind of have to figure out what's important to you and what you want to do with your years. Because the way that I see it is, I think it was Bill Gates who said that we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in a decade. And so like the way that I see that is like in the short term, we really don't have that much time. But over longer periods of time, we have a lot of time because the time compounds on itself. So like over 10 years, 15 minutes a day is a lot of time because that compounds, that adds up. So like that 15 minutes a day that you're spending practicing piano or spending with your children or doing whatever it is, that's going to compound. That's going to make a big difference. But over the short term, we think that like, oh, I want to have 6-pack abs. I better go to the gym 4 hours a day. And how long does that last?
Yeah, and I like that too, because I think part of it is also, we also are not always great at sort of estimating, the sort of trajectory to a goal. Like we tend to think in our heads it'll be a straight line, smooth, easy, right? And we're not good at, because we can't like foresee the future, obviously, but we're not good at accounting for, that we're going to definitely run into obstacles. There's definitely going to be problems. We're definitely, and I think so over the long period of time, we do see a huge amount of gain because we get through all these things. We learn a lot, we develop more skills, and, the majority of the process becomes easier over time, right? And you get better at handling that stuff. But at the short term, you're not going to be good at it and you won't know what to expect. And so that's going to, be a huge stumbling block on the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which brings me to Stoic brain hack number, I don't know what we're on right now, but the next Stoic brain hack that I would like to mention is patience, also known as endurance.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most well-known Stoic virtues, but probably the hardest for like anybody out there is being patient, enduring through difficulty, because that's something that, we all like. I can't tell you how long I've wanted to be a shredding guitarist, and I'm just not yet. Like I can play pretty average, I can play songs, I can play some solos, pretty average. I haven't put in the amount of time that's needed to become an absolutely shredding guitarist. But like, it's something where if I'm patient, by the time I'm 50 or 60, I could probably shred. And considering that what I'm putting in right now in terms of time is what I'm allotting myself for it, I'm okay with being patient for that.
And I think that's also a big part of it, right? Is recognizing that, like how committed are you? How much time are you willing to, or can you invest? And so I think that's a great example where, it's just, reminding yourself again and again that, it will happen. I just need to keep at it, right? And like recognizing that and then kind of tempering down that anxiety or worry or whatever, that negative sort of, thoughts about that it's not going to happen, it's not going to work out, this will never work, kind of thinking. And I think a lot of it too, I think a lot of patience too is also just, it's learning how to deal with those sort of very reactionary emotions of like anxiety, of stress that really tend to cause us to kind of abandon things, right? Because we blow things out of proportion. We imagine like the worst, we imagine that it's impossible, and then we don't just endure with it to get through those moments to where our perspective shifts.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is giving us a long enough time frame, a long enough time horizon. Because with a long enough time horizon, we can literally learn anything.
Yeah.
Like if you had infinite years and you had the interest to stick with it, you could learn anything, no matter how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Because it's just there's so, but most of us want it immediately. We all want it right now, and that's the difficulty, is that a lot of things, you can try ramping up the effort as much as possible, but even some things just need time, need patience.
Well, and it's like, as we mentioned in our quick fix too earlier, right? The whole idea of comfort, right? And getting comfortable with discomfort is a thing that everybody struggles with, I think, especially now. I mean, I think life has gotten very easy in a lot of ways. We have temperature controlled environments. Food's not necessarily a huge deal for many people.
We have a quick
Life,
fix pill popping type of culture. Everybody
yeah.
wants to take a pill and fix it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we have an industry in medicine known as lifestyle drugs, because instead of changing your lifestyle, like exercising and diet, you take a pill, because taking a pill every day is easier in some sense, I guess. And, it's when you think of it like in those terms, it's this sort of obsession with security and comfort that also gets in the way of us living a life that is worthwhile, valuable, meaningful, and one that we're proud of, right? I think over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was one thing that that we were talking about earlier when you were talking about it when Massimo was on the show, and it was his book is really good, The Field Guide to a Happy Life, and highly recommended for everyone to read it. And
Absolutely.
one thing that I got from it, because like a lot of us, we try to achieve these things, and then we encounter some difficulty and we stop, or we complain about the difficulty. Surprise, surprise, or so like all this stuff happens, and then we start beating ourselves up because we weren't smart enough, it wasn't easy enough, it didn't happen fast enough, this is the 30th time I've failed, blah 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 blah. Okay, so like one thing that he mentioned in the book that I'd never heard before, but it was really eye-opening for me, was that the novice blames other people, like the whole victimization type of thing. The person with more experience blames himself, but the expert doesn't blame anyone, doesn't blame others, doesn't blame himself, because he realizes that he's a human. We have problems, we have difficulties. It's part of being human. And so like being able to see that, not being victimized, not blaming yourself, just being like, you know what? Another difficulty. Guess it'll just take a little bit longer. Here we go.
Wait, and what's funny about that too? It's also like it's the extent to which you really understand what's important and what's valuable. Because we these sort of like blaming and blaming ourselves, blaming others, it's all about, really a lot of times it's about a misunderstanding of what's valuable, or it's taking things way too seriously, when the reality is that you can do it again, you can try again, there's more time, or you can do it a different way, or you can make it better in a week or next week as you work on it more. Most things are not that serious in life, really, when you get down to it, right? And I think that's part of it, is we pretend, or we get ourselves so worked up about stuff like, I mean, I've seen people literally lose it because they were unable to get like the newest iPhone or something that came out because there was a shortage. It's like, really? Like, it'll be out later, just wait. Like, it's not the end of the world. And I think that sort of like immediacy need for it right now, it gets in the way of a lot of sort of people being happy. You just can't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, another Stoic thing to look at is learning to change your perspective. Though, so I think it was Zeno who was in the boat accident. Was that who it was? His boat sank. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
basically, he was a very rich merchant. He was going to make a ton of money off of all this stuff. from trade, and his boat sank, and so he was
Yeah.
shipwrecked, and then he washed up in Athens or something like that. And he's like, instead of bemoaning himself and wailing and crying and being like, "Oh, my life is ruined, I've lost it all," he was like, "Well, at least I have nothing to worry about now." So like being able to
Yeah.
having that shift in perspective to see the better side.
Well, he literally lost it all too, and was in a place where he essentially wasn't at home, right? So he's also stuck somewhere different, and then literally has to find something completely new, completely different, a different way of living essentially, because he has nothing left what he had before. So I think, yeah, it's a good way to think of it. You have to just keep moving forward. Also, time keeps going, life keeps going. You can't just stop
Mm-hmm.
and just like sort of drown with all your stuff, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but perspective is a very good thing. And so like at least in America, I'm not sure too much about the rest of the world, but like in America, Stoicism is very, very trendy right now. And we are like the most comfortable culture, one of the richest countries in the entire world. Like literally, if
And
you are below the poverty line in America, you're still doing better than 80% of the world. So
yeah, and we're also totally focused on things out of our control all the time.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's learning to shift your perspective. Because what's the name of
Well,
that?
it is too. I think it should be pointed out too. It's funny because you look at trends in like these trends of using like stoicism and things like that, and a lot of times, not always, and I don't want not condemning everyone. There's a lot of great, I think, people out there working in stoicism and using it and touting its benefits, but it's also used a lot of times, I think, just to justify what people are already doing. They're not really engaged in it as a way to sort of actually change themselves or better themselves or think about things in a deep way. They're looking for a way to sort of kind of make themselves feel good about what they're already doing. And that is a huge distinction, I think, to make between actually really practicing something versus, looking for a justification.
Can you go into that a little bit deeper? Because I'm not sure I understand exactly.
So like there's, I forget the book. It's like, I know there's one like How to Think or like a Roman emperor or some nonsense, like something like that. And like, but this idea that, you have these Silicon Valley people who like, have to, if you think about it, you're in big business, you're acting in a way where you don't care necessarily about like your employees. You're doing things, in a way where it's very cold. And this idea that, like emotions don't matter. And, all I have to do is, as long as I'm achieving something and blah, blah, blah. And like, this kind of making yourself or pretending that you are stoic in order to sort of, or cherry picking only the things that work for you. That's the other way to look at it, I guess. Only the things that are easiest to incorporate into your life rather than the whole philosophy. I think that's part of, kind of the misappropriation of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because that's a good point. Because stoicism isn't just recognizing what's in your control. So like that's like stoicism 101. It's basically like that's how you get your foot in the door, because then you have to actually do some really difficult stuff. Like you have to figure out what's valuable to you. You have to live a virtuous life. And like that's where the shit hits the fan, because that's when it's difficult. When you have to actually live this stuff from day to day.
Well, and that's the funny thing too, is if you look at the Stoics, right? I mean, most of the Stoics, were valued community, valued helping others, valued being, part of, not just an individual in the world, but part of the world. And when you look at the sort of trendy side of Stoicism and you look at the people practicing it, that's really at odds with what they're doing, and I think
that's a great point. How like the Stoics saw the cosmopolis, or like they realized that we were all part of the whole, and that it was better for the benefit of the whole. Like I remember that example from the book where like if you lost your helmet, it was kind of like a slap on the wrist, but if you lost your shield, it was really big stuff, because your helmet, that only affected your own defense. So like if you lost your helmet, you could die, but the army survives. If you lose your shield, then you can't make that like shield wall from 300, and then everybody could go.
Yeah, you got a weak link, right? And it affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, and there's also that point too, where, a lot of these, I think a lot of these a lot of these philosophies, Stoicism included, it's not just, it's about living a better life. It's about living a good life. But there's also the recognition that, when you do that, and when the community betters, everyone can live a better life and your life is better. And I think a lot of that is totally glossed over or missed in the misappropriation of it, because that's the stuff that I think that's the other thing. That's the stuff that starts to get hard. That's the stuff where it starts to take more effort and work. And I think that's why it's not necessarily favored.
Yeah, but it's an important point. There's this book that I like to listen to called The Science of Getting Rich by Waddles. And in it, he says that like the universe is trying to move forward, trying to be the best that it can be. And in order for it to be the best that it can be, you have to be the best that you can be. And one way that you have to be the best you can be is to become rich. Because until you can become rich, you really can't do everything that you want to do. You can't fulfill all of your desires. You can't become the best version of you. And so it's kind of in that same vein where you have to realize that, life isn't only about you. Like popular Stoicism, very popular in this very individualistic society, but really it's about moving everybody forward. Not just about getting your Lamborghini and your watch and posting on Instagram.
Yeah, and I think and that's part of it too, right? Because you have this individualist culture, and you have this, and I think that it's I understand that the desire to look for ways to make yourselves feel better. It makes sense. Everybody wants to feel good about what they're doing, and so there's there is that, but it's I think any good life type philosophy, where it takes personal development, they're lifelong and they're hard, and they require daily practice and effort, and really, thinking about it almost all the time if you really want to improve. Like virtue, it can sometimes seem easy, when we read, even when you read the classic works, right? Even reading like the Nicomachean Ethics, or reading like, the Enchiridion, it can sound simple what you need to do. And I think, but once you start doing it, you realize that it's not. Like, it is hard because, it's human world's kind of a messy thing. It's, we're complicated, and it's really about developing that self-control, self-knowledge, self-awareness that enables you to then be the best you in the world, right? And I think that takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah. So now that we've discussed kind of a overview, let's give people some Stoic brain hacks, right?
Oh, yeah. Things they can do that'll help them get there, and I think start thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. So like we talk about virtues and living a virtuous life. Brain hack for virtues and living a virtuous life. You have to figure out what's valuable to you. Like plain and simple.
Yeah,
pencil and paper, or journal's great, but like you need to figure out what's important to you. Like not what society wants you to do, not what your parents want you to do, not what your neighbors want you to do. And if you're married in a family, honestly, not what your wife and your children want you to do. Like you honestly need to figure out what's important to you. And hopefully if you're in a family with wife and children, that's going to be important to you, or else you might have made a mistake. But yeah, and it's okay to make mistakes. We're human. But the thing is, like, actually sitting down and figuring out what's important to you. And so some brain hacks, some things to kind of get you started going in that direction would be like, if anything was possible, what would you do? If you had all the money in the world, what would your day-to-day life look like? What would you do? Because once you're done with that trip around the world and, buying Lamborghini, you still have to live 24 hours a day, every day. So what does that day look like? And then like, okay, if every job paid the same, what would you do? So like these types of things to try and get you started in the direction of what's valuable to you. What do you want your life to look like? What are you willing to give up your life energy for?
I like that too. And also asking yourself, like in the sense of like, what really matters? We get focused on, whether it's image or objects or what have you, and asking yourself, what really matters? What really is the difference? What do I really need? So like getting down to like the basics of like, what are my real needs? Like I need to eat, I need shelter, right? Those sorts of things. What does that look like? And starting to understand the distinction between fulfilling a need versus like excess. And recognizing that, why am I focused on certain things, or why am I kind of going after these? Do they really matter? And that's a nice way to actually help start to sort of, I think, get a bit more control in your life and get a bit more sort of sense of, kind of like, I guess, your reaction to things and your wants and desires, and getting them in check, which can be very helpful for starting to like, live your own life.
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part of it too is like also recognizing, you're responsible for yourself. Really, really taking that to heart and thinking about the fact, like, I make my choices, right? I'm responsible for how I think, how I look at the world, how I act, and really understanding what that means.
That's a great point, because a lot of people want to kind of shuck responsibility. They're like, oh, I would love to like live somewhere else, but that means I can't do that. Like my family's here. And I love your response to that last week or whatever, where you're like, yeah, that's called making a choice, bud.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah.
I never understand it. Every choice is you're giving up something, right? I mean, that's the whole point. And it's like realizing that you can do that, yeah, but that's about knowing your values.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So,
mean,
mhm.
oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's like a lot of, I think we had mentioned some of the, there's like some little things you can do too, that just to help with like, kind of getting in the right frame of mind, seeing what you have control over, like, exercise, obviously, like, cold showers, those sorts of things are very useful, I think, as a way to just see that you can endure through things, to see that you can, it also shows you that you can over time, develop and better yourself. And sometimes it's, I think, the analogy to exercise is helpful sometimes because it's a physical thing that you see and feel in a very real, tangible way. Whereas like when you're working on yourself from a character standpoint or your attitude, it's not always easy to see. It's not always easy to perceive immediately the changes. So it's sometimes, I think, using that analogy to exercise, you you kind of see that it's a slow progression, but it is a progression and it builds on itself. And the same is true for your mind and for your character. And I think once you realize that, it also helps a lot because you realize the type of effort required, the type of routine, the type of practice.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because anybody who's exercised before, after you do it for a while, you get to that point where you look at yourself in the mirror and you can notice the difference. But a lot
Yeah.
of other things, it's much more difficult, like you said, to actually notice the difference, because it's kind of that wherever you go, there you are. The difference, the changes are so subtle that like really you're kind of in your mind, you're like, is this a difference? Is this not a difference? I really can't tell. I don't know. And so kind of just believing that it is making a difference and you just need to continue with it.
Yeah. And like, I think too, because like a lot of people, I'm sure at first, like if you try and work on like, your attitude towards something, your perspective, you're going to fail. Like almost always at first. I mean, it's just because you've trained yourself to think a certain way, and you have to realize that to sort of untrain that mode of thinking takes basically confronting it a lot, butting heads with it over and over again, which means failing to do the thing that you want essentially to get that shift. It's not going to happen immediately.
And that's
Yeah.
it's a really good metric to go on, because
Yeah.
a lot of people are failure averse. Like they think that when it doesn't go a certain way, it's terrible. But actually, that's a really good metric when you're trying to get in the reps to actually count failures. And I used to do this when I did like the pickup with girls, because like you could go and chat up a girl and you would just fall flat on your face, and you would get rejected. They would be too bit, all this stuff, and like it was easy to get into headspace of like, oh, this is just not my day. It's not going. But whenever that would happen, I would either say to myself or say to one of my friends, okay, just start counting failures. Do 10 more, get rejected 10 more times and then call it a day. And like, once you get to that mindset, you almost can't get rejected, because you're like trying to get rejected. And girls are like, why are you trying to like get me to leave you? Like, I'm not going to leave you if you want me to leave you. And so it's kind of like getting to that point in life where you can count the failures, realizing that that's on, it's part of the steps that you have to go, but it takes the sting away from the failures and also gives you a very tangible goal to achieve.
Yeah, I think also too, and once you get on the path too of like, you know, really trying to work on these things, I think you also realize too that it is just the journey, right? That there's, in a sense, like the whole like our whole notion of failure is so um it's so narrow. It's so, it's like it's either that you either succeed or fail, but that's not really how life works, right? It's an
I know the
ongoing
school system
thing.
messed us up so
It
much,
doesn't make
like
any
for
sense.
life.
It's so weird.
They're like, if you don't get a 90 or above, you're a failure. You're never going to get anywhere. I'm putting this on your permanent record. And you're like,
Yeah,
no, not the permanent record.
but it's that whole idea, right? That like it's like this perpetual sort of like running tally of your value or some shit that doesn't really matter. You can change things anytime you want. So I think but it takes a long time to get out of that way of thinking, where it's not worth my time if it's not immediate success and it's not immediately valuable and paying off, because it is, it can often seem like, it's not worth it. But I think once you get into it, you realize like, it doesn't matter. As long as I keep doing it, I'll succeed in, whatever sense I mean that. And then, the failures all add up to valuable in that end.
Yeah. And going on to that, the other Stoic virtue we talk about is patience. And so realizing that things are going to take a lot of time and actually plotting it out, like looking at your life. Because I didn't, until a few years ago, I didn't have anything more than like a 3-month plan for my life. And then, and, and so like actually writing down a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and even further than that, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then seeing that like, okay, if this takes 10 times as much effort as I think it's going to take, or if this takes 10 times longer than I think it's going to take, is it still worth it? Yeah. And
I like that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And even like, if this is something that I never succeed at, never truly succeed to my expectations, is it still worth it? And that's the stuff you should pursue, because that makes life worth living, because then you're actually enjoying the journey.
And that's all it is, right? I know it's funny too. It's like, it's funny a lot of times too when I think about it, because it's like, why wouldn't you want to live a good life? Why wouldn't you want to live your own life, right? Like people make it out to be so hard, like, it's so hard. And it's like, but
Well, dude,
don't you
we're
want to like,
deceived.
yeah.
We're all going after these things that we don't actually want to impress people we don't actually like.
Yeah, that's true, right? That's funny. But it's true. It's like once you start living, your own life, I mean, it's like it's valuable because it's your life and this is your one life, right? There can't be anything essentially more valuable than that. So making it your own and living the way that's right for you, I think is essential. And yeah, it takes work, because in a sense you have to like, it's almost like you have to like, in a way, you have to untrain a bunch of stuff that's like been sort of dumped on you from society and other things. And you have to sort of get that out of there and start really focusing on you in a way. And I think that's the benefit of it.
Dude, here's another thing that just slipped in my mind as we were talking. Write your whatever they call that thing when you die and it's in the newspaper. Write that.
Obituary.
Obituary. There we go. Write your own obituary. How about that? Looking at, because we always talk about, like, I use that as kind of a judgment metric, is looking at stuff from my deathbed. Because I'm like, if I'm going to regret this when I'm on my deathbed, I'm definitely 100% doing it right now. But actually writing your obituary, because there's going to be a day for everybody listening to this podcast. Guaranteed there's going to be a day where you're going to die. And chances are you're going to have an obituary written. But handy hint, if you actually write it down now, there is a greater chance that is what it will actually happen.
And I like that too, because you can also kind of explore, what would you want it to really say? What would be the things that really matter being included in there? Because that's another way to get towards, and I think all these like little things are ways to get to what matters to you, what's valuable to you, as a starting point for really understanding how to live your own life and how to be responsible and how to have control. I think that's a great example. Yeah. Like, does it matter to you really who was there? Does it matter how people thought of you? Did leaving a legacy, what the hell were the things that actually mattered to you in this,
Yeah, I mean, do you want it to say like, here lies so and so who had a terrible anger problem. He was too afraid to do what he actually wanted because he thought he was afraid of people's judgments. So he stuck doing a job he really didn't like forever because it had health insurance. Like, is that what you are? Is that what you want your obituary to say? Or do you want it to say he messed up so many times, but finally figured it out when he was 65 and was the happiest person I've ever seen in my entire life? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that too, because it's it's funny too, because I think people forget too that like when they sort of forfeit their control and their responsibility, they forget too like all these things that they let ruin their lives and then ruin the lives of those close to them, right? Because like you hate your job and you take that home and all, and it's like, and you act like it's not. It's like, but it is your fault. You're putting yourself there, right? You're letting yourself think this way. You're letting yourself behave this way and react this way. And so, yeah, it is you, not something else. It's not the circumstances. And I think that's, it's a good example. I like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The obituary is a good one. That's a good idea.
Yeah. That's a Stoic brain hack.
Right there. I like that.
Yeah. And I would say, let's say, what other ones? I'm not sure if this particularly is a Stoic thing, but I would say, have faith in yourself. Believe in yourself that it'll work out. Because, I mean, who's to say? Nobody knows if it will or if it won't. But if you believe in yourself and you believe that it will work out, you're going to go into it with a much better chance of it actually working out. And like, I remember Wim Hof did an interview with somebody and they were like, if there was one thing that you would have liked to have told the younger version of you, what would it be? And he said, have faith. And it makes sense because like, our lives are going to turn out however they turn out.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. Like it's in one of Nietzsche's last books, he says, he asked the question, he's like, what could be more important than cheerfulness? And he says, because nothing gets done without a dose of high spirits, right? Like you need that like energy and that like, ready to go attitude, right? To get things done. And I think you see, I think that's not an uncommon view in a lot of these ways of looking at life and thinking about life is that, if you have faith in yourself in that sense, I like that because, you're more likely to have the sort of energy and the willingness to keep at it, to keep doing it, to make things better and to live that better life rather than sort of just giving up.
It actually gives you the ability. It gives you the ability to be patient.
Yeah.
Because if you have faith and if you know it's going to work out for you, then you can be patient because you'll be like, today could be the day. And if it's not today, today could be and tomorrow. You say today could be the day. And like each day, today could be the day. So it gives you that ability to persist.
No, I like that. And I think from the Stoic standpoint too, if you focus on, if you're focusing on what you have control over, if you're focusing on doing the things that are right for that thing to happen, it will happen eventually, right? So you can have that faith comes sort of like goes hand in hand with it because you're doing all the right things. It may not work out, but generally speaking, you're doing everything you can to make it happen. So you should have faith that, like, at least in that sense, that you're doing everything right, right? And I think that's the important thing too, is recognizing that, like, am I doing all that I can do, right? Am I doing everything that's within my power? And as long as I am, then it doesn't matter. Everything, I shouldn't worry about anything else because I've done all that I can. And I think that's also an important way to look at it because it helps you sort of not worry so much about the results, but about what you can do now to make those results happen, or at least make them the best possible chance to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much all the brain hacks you need.
Yeah. Just do that stuff and, live your own life and don't stress about stuff too much because it's not going to help.
Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah, no.
And have faith.
And I think also too, just notice that it's worthwhile to work on yourself, right? It makes it better. Why wouldn't you want to live a better life? It seems like the simplest question.
Well, it's like a lot of people get stuck. Like I myself we just get like brainwashed.
I
You
know.
know, you're
Yeah,
a
it's
very young
crazy.
child. You go to school. Everybody tells you you need to get good grades in school so you can go to a good college, so you can meet the right person, have a family, buy a house. And this is all bullshit. And but the thing
Yeah.
is, like, all of it, because it's so indoctrinated into us, and not to mention on that path, we learn that failure is bad. You know, so like
Yeah.
we just get suckered into it. And so starting to think for yourself and ask yourself good questions.
Yeah. It's a crucial thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. It's a good place to end. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, these are brain hacks, right? What do we?
Brain hacks for
There we go.
Stoics, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. That works
Hack
well. I
your
like
brain
it.
like a Stoic. There we go.
Yeah. I was a hack your brain like a stoic. I like that. Episode 53, the first episode of season 2. If you're listening, guys, the podcast apps, please check us out on YouTube as well. Watch it, and vice versa. Subscribe, click like, notifications, whatever. It helps us out a lot. We appreciate it, and we will be back next week with a midweek with a quick fix, and next week with another episode. Till then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.